Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. My name is Jay Disberger, your one and only HopeFilled financial coach, and I'm happy that you're with us today. I'm going to start today with another story from college. I know that I share a lot of stories from my academic experience, but I think that was the point of my academic experience, was to teach me lessons that I can share with you through these stories. Today's story is going to revolve around the classes that I took that were specific to my degree. In the architectural engineering department at Kansas State University, there's a particular policy that you're introduced to in your freshman year. That is, you're supposed to be building a collection of notebooks. You're supposed to make these notebooks in such a way that you can reference them in your future career. You're not just there to take notes so that you can study for the tests and the homework, pass the class, and move on. They want you to take these notebooks and create a resource, a whole library of resources that you can turn to if you ever have questions in your working life. In order to encourage students to build an appropriate and usable library, they make it a policy that you recopy your notes from class into something that's a little bit neater. As a part of rewriting your notes, it was expected that you did 100% of your note-taking all in engineering lettering, or all caps, if you will. Everything was capital lettering. No lowercase letters were allowed in your notebook. I originally said, you're not going to break me. You're not going to get me to spend time pointlessly copying down notes that I may never look back at ever again. And you're certainly not going to force me to change the way that I write my letters. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the copying down of your notes and having a neat, organized book that followed the lettering policy was a huge part of your grade. So they did break me of it. Now I do still write everything in engineering-styled lettering. In the first class in particular, where they had you rewrite your notes in engineering lettering, they insisted that you use a straight edge for everything, drawings and your letters. Any letter which had a straight edge, you needed to be using a ruler and a drafting pencil in order to write down. It was expected that you included every sketch that was drawn on the whiteboard in class, redrawn neater than it was on that whiteboard. It was also expected that you didn't have any smudges or miscellaneous doodling on the side of the notebook that didn't have any purpose in the notebook. It was also expected that you didn't use any shorthand that would make it impossible for someone other than you to read your work. In engineering, and in life, it's important that when you have communication, be it written or spoken, that it is clear in such a way that it is going to convey what you want to concisely to your audience. In my branch of engineering, you communicate with a lot of written and graphical forms, so it was important that you could draw things very well. It was also important that your writing could never be misread. This is the fundamental basis behind the idea of writing everything in engineering lettering. Now, hearing this policy, hearing the rules that were involved around rewriting your notes for pretty much every class in the department, you might, if you put yourself in my shoes, feel the same kind of resistance that I did when this was pushed to me. I didn't have time, at least in my mind, I didn't have time to rewrite all of the notes. I had studying to do. I had other classes that were harder than the ones that I was taking in particular, where they really wanted you to rewrite your notes. But I cared a lot about my grades, and that was enough for me to get over the resistance that I had to taking the time, effort, and discipline to do a good job making the notebook. As people, we do try to take the path of least resistance. We do push back against change and practices, habits, if you will, that take a lot of time and energy, thought, preparation, intentionality, discipline. I think this is only natural as we're evolved to be conservative with our energy and try to dedicate our resource of time and energy into our top priorities. A major problem with this particular evolution, if you will, is we have indeed evolved way past hunting and gathering. Our energy conservation is no longer necessary in order for survival, at least not in the same capacity. Tasks such as communicating things properly or planning our goals on paper on purpose are examples of tasks that ultimately do result in more efficient use of our time. But it takes a discipline and an intentionality that we just naturally resist. This is what I had to get over in order to copy my notes down and do a good job. Later, I did end up referencing these books in my working career, even the ones that I didn't think that I was going to ever open again. And it was nice to have something that was organized where I could look up what I was trying to find, and it was written in a way that I could understand it without having to translate it. I had some classes where I wasn't required to rewrite my notes, and in those classes I didn't. Looking back at those notes as I studied for the fundamental engineering exam or the professional engineering exam, they were harder for me to read and understand. In fact, it was easier to go back to textbooks and relearn some of the material instead of trying to glean what I was thinking back when I scribbled down the notes. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to hold up a page from one of the neater notebooks that I wrote so that you have an example. This is a fairly simple page, but it's neat enough and clean enough that you can probably read it decently well on camera. In the end, was exercising the discipline to rewrite the notes worth it? I think it was. I think it resulted in a valuable resource that I didn't fully grasp as a student, that I wasn't mature enough to fully understand. It also helped me study for the material in that class without me even realizing I was studying. I hardly had to do any preparation for the exams because rewriting the notes was enough to really enforce the material in my mind that I could remember it. I just knew what was going to be on those tests, and I knew what the answers were going to be. It made the class fairly easy. The main lesson that I want you to take away from my story today, the main lesson that I learned, was that there are some tasks, there are some things that we have to do in our day-to-day life that aren't pleasant. We're naturally going to resist them, and that is natural. It's okay to feel like, oh, I really don't want to do this. But exercising intentionality and discipline for those unpleasant tasks today can yield a fruitful future for us. They can yield a greater good for our sake and the sake of those whom we love. And with that in mind, let's move on to today's budget tip. Today's budget tip is if you're not married, in particular, if you're not married and you're running a budget, it can be very useful to have an accountability partner in your life. An accountability partner is a friend or family member who's also budgeting, who really values the idea of budgeting and is striving to build a good habit of budgeting every month. In finding an accountability partner, you can set up a time where you say, hey, did you do your monthly budget? And they do the same thing to you. They ask you, did you do your monthly budget? When you have someone who's going to ask you about you having done your monthly budget, hey, did you reconcile last month? Not necessarily asking for specific details and all, but you have someone in your life who's asking you about it, and that gives you some motivation to get past that resistance we talked about in the story. An accountability partner can push you through the natural resistance to discipline that a budget requires in order to accomplish. And as a result, building up a habit of budgeting with the help of your accountability partner can yield a very healthy habit that helps you be more free and fruitful than you ever thought possible with your money. In school, if I didn't want to do the notes and I was procrastinating on them, or I didn't want to do a particular homework assignment, I would find friends who were in that class and say, hey, do you want to copy notes down in between classes today? Or are you working on this homework assignment? Maybe we can work on it together. That way, I had a framework where I could be held accountable to my actions and my priorities. It's a short budget tip today, but it's one that can be very valuable if you're experiencing resistance to starting budgeting. Now it's time to answer a question submitted by you. Today's question comes from Kathleen. Kathleen asks, how do I exercise self-control to stop buying things I don't need, especially things that are on sale? First and foremost, thank you, Kathleen, for your question. I'm going to answer your question with the top 3 ways that you can combat buying things you don't need just because they're on sale. First, it can be very helpful, especially on major purchases, to sleep on whatever it is that you're thinking of buying. Spend at least 24 hours between saying, hey, I want to buy this thing, and actually buying it. Your brain is going to get the sense of excitement when it comes to making a decision spontaneously. It's going to feel the sense of urgency if there's a deal. So if you just wait at least 24 hours between that little buzz that you get on, ooh, I should get that. And when you actually buy it, you might be able to get past that initial jolt of excitement and realize, I don't really need that thing, or there might be a better deal if I wait. And that can help filter out a lot of impulse purchases, especially when it comes to sales. Number 2, know that your brain naturally tricks you when it comes to transaction utility. Transaction utility is that sense of value and purpose that you see when you see a big sale. Amazon Prime does a great job of exercising your brain's desire for transaction utility on Prime Week. There are a lot of deals that populate during Prime Week, especially for those who are subscribed to Amazon Prime. Some of these sales, especially on things like technology, can be like 75, 80% off. And we get very excited when we see something like that, even if it's something that we don't need. In one of my workshops, the one that in particular covers frugality as the main topic, I discussed transaction utility. I actually wrote it during Prime Week. I found a TV that was on sale. I went to the deals, I picked the first TV, and I looked at the price history. What I found is that during the wintertime, there was actually a better deal on the TV. And just before Prime Week hit, the price was super inflated so that when the sale kicked in during Prime Week, it looked like it was a bigger sale. A lot of retailers will do this where they beef up the price so that the sale looks like it's bigger. The bigger the sale, the bigger the perceived savings that you have, the more dopamine that hits your brain when you feel like, ooh, I'm going to get a good deal. Just understanding the fact that retailers are exercising this spark of, ooh, I got to get it out of your brain, and you realizing that it exists, even if it is a good deal, that sense of urgency that you have, it's just a feeling, and it's one that might lead to buyer's remorse later if you act on it all the time. Finally, number 3, if you have a budget, you're way less likely to make impulse purchases on sales. Because in a zero-based budget, you assign every single dollar a mission. Every single dollar is assigned. You can't go and spend something that you didn't have in your budget without sacrificing another priority that you on paper, on purpose, already decided about. Having a budget is going to increase friction between you and an impulse purchase because making that impulse purchase is just going to mean that you have to go back to the budget, rearrange things, and make decisions again that you already made. You're going to have to spend more time exercising intentionality and discipline on paper, on purpose. We don't want to do that. We don't want to exercise more time, effort, intentionality, and discipline budgeting than we have to. Because of this, budgets are a very powerful way to dissuade us from making impulse purchases. This doesn't mean that we can't ever make an impulse purchase. You can make room for it in a budget. But it means that you get to be very intentional and controlled about it. And don't think about it as something that's restricting your ability to make an impulse purchase. If you didn't have a budget otherwise and you made the same purchase, you're really sacrificing those same goals and dreams that exist. They just weren't written down. You didn't have to organize them, and you didn't realize that you couldn't afford to make that impulse purchase without sacrificing something that's a genuine priority over and beyond that impulse. And that makes a great segue into today's main topic, the top 10 reasons why you need a budget. All right, we're going to count them down. Reason number 10 why you need a budget is budgets are the strongest way that you can fight against transaction utility. I know we already discussed this, but to reiterate, we naturally resist the discipline it takes to write a budget. So if we make our written plan and we care about it, we actually want to implement it, then transaction utility is going to have a lot less power over us. With a budget, you get to tell your money what it's doing. This is as opposed to the lack of money telling you what you can't do. Reason number 9 why you need a budget. A budget is going to constructively apply natural mental accounting. Mental accounting is something we naturally do in our psychology when we come across newfound money. We naturally will associate our paycheck or our income with money that needs to go to our 4 walls and some of our wants. But if you come into money that you weren't expecting, say you get a large gift or you find $200 on the sidewalk, well, your mental accounting is going to naturally tell you, hey, you know what? We could go splurge on this. We could go use this to buy something that we never would if we were actually making an extra $200 a month. Because money is fungible, this is a logical violation of our priorities. If you were to put that money in your income slot on the budget, you'd probably apply it to a longer term and more valuable priority than splurging on something spontaneously. So budgeting allows us to exercise our mental accounting in a way that actually reflects what truly matters to us, as opposed to our emotions dictating what happens to money that we weren't expecting. Reason number 8, this is one of my favorites. Budgeting helps you practically apply opportunity cost. There's a quote by Dan Arley. The quote reads, "The problem with opportunity cost is that opportunity cost is divided among many, many things." In other words, the problem with opportunity cost is that you can exchange, because of the fungibility of money, one opportunity for an infinite number of others. You could say, hey, instead of buying this coffee, which say is $6, I could buy myself a really nice fancy dessert after lunch. And if you didn't spend that money on something that you consumed that day, you could invest it. That money could then grow with compound interest and be applied toward your retirement. But what if saving for retirement wasn't your main priority? What if it was paying off debt? Well, then that coffee that you bought could have been used to pay off your debt. You can basically replace any of your purchase decisions with an infinite number of others. So how is opportunity cost going to be helpful? Well, with a budget, when you need to move something around or as you're mapping out what you're going to spend your money on, anytime you decide to move a dollar from one line item to another line item, you're basically saying this particular opportunity cost is going to be applied to the actual next best priority that I have. Having a budget allows you to rearrange your priorities in such a way that opportunity cost becomes finite. If you didn't spend money on a particular category, then it immediately goes to the next best priority on your list. And if you overspend your budget, you're going to pull from the lowest priority that you have that otherwise would get money. This allows you to really exercise opportunity cost in a way that is just simply practical and beautiful, and you don't even have to think about it. Otherwise, opportunity cost is going to infinitely hurt our brain. Reason number 7 why you need a budget. Budgets are a home for your written dreams and goals. You're going to hear it almost anywhere if you go to a seminar or read a self-help book. How do I make my dreams and goals a reality? Well, almost everyone's going to say, well, you got to write it down. It's like, no, I got it up here. Writing it down is an intentional step. Writing something down takes an intentional discipline that triggers future action. It also allows us to remind ourselves of that particular goal anytime we see it written down. Write your goal down and put it in a place where you have to see it again and again and again. It helps you drive your actions to accomplish your genuine priorities, your genuine dreams and goals. If nothing else, a budget is a home where our dreams and goals live, where we can revisit them at least once a month, probably weekly, and see them and see that we're on track for them. Anytime we have a dream or a goal that involves money, even if it involves money indirectly, it can live in the budget in such a way that we are motivated to actually accomplish them. And according to the experts, this is a first step in actually making dreams and goals become reality. Reason number 6 why you need a budget. If you're married, budgeting helps facilitate communication and collaboration. Since Amanda and I have been married, we've run a budget every single month. We haven't missed a month yet. And the things that matter to us, our values and our virtues, get expressed anytime we have a budget meeting. We get to communicate about what matters to us and what's going on in our lives. We get to talk about the plans that are on the calendar and the things that we really need to be intentional about. And together we get to agree on anything that is a want. We get to agree on acting on our mutual wants and our individual wants. In doing so, we're exercising an expression of communication, collaboration, and genuine love. I'm reading the book, The Road Less Traveled, right now, and the particular chapter that I'm going through describes love as an exercise of discipline. In genuine love, real love is an exercise of discipline. This is simply facilitated in the budget when you budget together. Reason number 5 why you need a budget. Budgets help you discover accounting errors from your bank and identity theft. If you go back to episode 14, I did an interview with Chalice. We discussed identity theft. One of the examples where I experienced identity theft is shared in that episode. Was only caught because I was running a monthly budget. When I pulled up my checking register and was going through the transactions, I was able to quickly discover within a week or two transactions that I did not initiate myself. They were fraudulently charged because someone had gotten my debit card information. Also, banks make errors. It happens. Everybody makes mistakes. So if you're keeping a good ledger of what you expect to be in your savings accounts and your checking accounts, and that lives in your budget, and you have reason to believe that there was an error in the bank, you can actually identify it and have the evidence and call them up and say, hey, I think there's an error. Please resolve it. And more often than not, if you do a good job with your budget, you're going to be right. Reason number 4 why you need a budget. A budget replaces your fear of the unknown with a plan for the future. When you budget, you're not just planning the next month's worth of time. You're looking into the future. You're trying to say, am I on pace to retire on time? Am I on pace to buy the next home? Am I on pace to get out of debt? There are so many goals that can take more than 10 years of discipline and intentional budgeting every month in order to come to genuine fruition. If I wasn't running a budget, I wouldn't know where I was on my path to achieve those future goals that really mattered to me. The budget not only allows me to know that I'm on track to make those goals happen, but it gives me peace of mind knowing that I'm in control of where those goals are going and that they're actually going to come true. Fear of the unknown is one of my greatest fears, and a budget helps me face it and conquer it. Reason number 3 why you need a budget. Budgeting ultimately reduces stress in your life. Rachel Cruz, Dave Ramsey's daughter, has a great story where she and her husband went on vacation, and they had been practicing budgeting. She's the free spirit in their marriage. She isn't all that into the budgeting every month, but she knows it's important. I mean, she's Dave Ramsey's daughter. Well, her husband said, you know what? We're going to go on vacation. Don't worry about the budget. I've got it. You spend on whatever it is that you want. I'm going to be running the numbers. I know we've put aside enough that we're going to be able to make it. It's going to be fine. Well, she recalls sitting there lounging at an all-expense resort where she was ordering stuff by the poolside, and the money started racking up, and it took her less than one afternoon to start feeling uncomfortable with the amount of money that she was spending. It was like, I don't know if I've given myself permission to do this. I know that he said that I could, but I don't know because I don't know the numbers. Ultimately, not having a budget, not understanding the opportunity cost for what she was spending was causing undue stress. Reason number 2 why you need a budget. Budgeting ultimately increases your freedom. When you're budgeting and you have a want that pops up, a want that you really, really want, and you've planned for it, you've saved for it, it comes due. You have the money for it. All of your other goals are on pace. You don't have anything that you're sacrificing by going and buying that want. You have total freedom to do it. You have given yourself written permission to buy it. And you don't have to feel like you're sacrificing something else to go buy that particular thing. It's on paper, on purpose. Oh, it's so freeing to be able to go buy something and feel no guilt for it, especially something that is purely a want. I've heard an example of how having guidelines for ourselves or rules actually increases our freedom. Imagine you and I wanted to play a game. I say, hey, would you like to play a game? You say, okay. And I say, okay, you go first. You go first. Your move. Well, you probably just sit there like, I don't know what to do. There's no structure for this game. There were no rules. You're paralyzed with inaction because there's nothing defined for you to do. And the opportunity cost for your own actions, your own exercise time is infinite. And that's paralyzing. By exercising a budget, it removes the paralysis of the analysis and gives you the plan. You've decided on paper on purpose in advance. You don't have to make the decision again. It frees you from having to make the decision. It's your move next. Well, what was next on the plan? It gives you freedom to proceed. Finally, reason number 1, the most important reason why you need a budget. A budget helps you become more frugal. We covered it in the first 4 episodes of the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. Frugality is the intentional practice of prudent economy. Frugality is the fundamental virtue for personal finance. Frugality, in a practical exercise, can only be fully lived out when you have a written plan for your money, when you're living out a budget. And whether you believe it or not, a budget is naturally going to help you become more frugal just by its nature. The exercise of intentionality and discipline will push you to becoming more frugal and ultimately happier with your financial life. And that's it. That's why you need a budget. If you know of any other reasons why you personally started budgeting or something that would motivate you to budget, please leave it in the comments below or send me a message. I'd love to cover it in a future episode. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you think. Next week, I'm going to introduce some other budgeting strategies that can help us fully live out our hope-filled financial future. Until then, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.